my name is Bénédicte H, and I'm going to present a joint work with, with Cahit, Guven, and Claudia, Senik, and the title is Retirement and Unexpected Health Shocks. So, in many countries, workers plan to retire as soon as they are entitled to, according to the laws in vigor in the country. And in some countries, there can even be massive demonstrations if there is any change in the time of retirement, in the age of retirement. The assumption is that retirement should be a greater source of well-being. Otherwise, people should not demonstrate against any postponement of the time of retirement. And our question in this paper is whether this is actually the case. Because in behavioral economics, there have been many illustrations of incorrect expectations. So the question here is to know whether retirement is associated with incorrect expectations. And so we are going to focus on the link between retirement and unexpected health shocks. So there is already a very large literature on the relationship between retirement and health, and I want to focus that this is not what we are going to do in this paper. However, obviously this literature is related to what we are doing. So in this very large literature on the effect of retirement on health, there is this general prior that retirement should make people happier and healthier. But on the other hand, there is also a very different assumption, which is that retirement is associated with anomia, disaffiliation, especially for people for whom the job is the main locus of socialization. And so for these people, maybe retirement could have a negative impact on health. In this literature, there is a very important methodological challenge due to endogeneity, meaning there is reverse causation running from health to retirement, in the sense that people who are in poor health obviously are more likely to retire in the next year or in the following month, on the one hand. And then there is also endogeneity for another reason, which is that there may be third common hidden factors affecting both retirement and health status. For instance, in the health literature, in general, we talk a lot about time preference that could have an effect on both retirement, the decision to retire, and health status. So the general way to solve this endogeneity problem in that literature is to find an instrument for retirement, and generally researchers use the legislation. For instance, any change in the pension eligibility age. However, even if many of these papers use the exact same method, they have rather contradictory results. So on the one hand, you have a series of papers finding a negative impact of retirement on health outcomes, so in the US and in Europe. So here I just gave a list of some of those papers. But there is also a literature finding positive effects of retirement on health outcomes, and in particular in Australia, which is the country that we are interested in. So, for this paper in Australia, the authors were just focusing on women because there had been a change in this pension eligibility age just for women, and this change happened pretty recently. So how can we explain all these differences, although these papers use the exact same method and some of them use even the same data? This could be to different econometric specifications, to different choice of control variables, and also to different cultures across countries in some sense. So there's a very detailed review of literature by Motegi and co-authors, and basically they tried to redo all these analyses using a very large number of data sets and trying different methods, different control variables, and showing the impact of these methodological changes. So our objective in this paper is to measure the effect of retirement on health shocks in particular. And so since we focus on these unexpected health changes, we believe that normally there's no endogeneity problem in the sense that there is no reverse causation, because an unexpected shock won't have any effect on the decision to retire by definition. So the data we are going to use is data from Australia, HILDA data, Household Income and Labour Dynamics in Australia, from 2001 to 2014, and we are going to focus on individuals aged 50 to 75. So we are going to use a series of variables which are very well known in public health and epidemiology in general, but we are going to use them in a new way. So this series of variables come from the 36-item short form health survey, SF36. So this survey contains a list of 35 questions which are, and the goal is to capture 8 different health concepts related to physical health and to mental health. And then there is one additional question about health transition. So we are going to use all this information. So first I'm going to explain how we create our variable capturing unexpected health shocks. So we are going to mix data on health expectation reported at t-1 with data on health transition reported at t, so 1 year later. So the question of health expectation comes from the SF36, and so it is labeled as follows. So how true or false is each of the following statements for you? I expect my health to get worse. And so the categories range from definitely true to definitely false. And so we are going to record them into 3 categories: true, don't know, or false. So we are going to take this health expectation at t-1. For health transition, this is a question about the evolution of health over the past 12 months. So is the health today much better than 1 year ago, etc., and much worse than 1 year ago? So again, we are going to record the answers into 3 categories: better, same, and worse. And so by combining these 2, we are going to get our main variable of interest. So in this table, I just show how we define it. So in the first column, this is unexpected negative shocks. So you're going to have an unexpected negative shock if at t-1 you say that you don't know whether your health will get worse, but at t you say that your health is worse than the previous year. You're also going to have an unexpected negative shock if at t-1 you say that you expect to have same or better health next year, but 1 year later you say that your health is eventually worse than before, okay? And so in this way we define positive shocks, what we call same shocks, and negative shocks. We also define 3 other categories, but we are not really going to focus on these categories, which are expected. So this is an expected change, meaning that you expected worse health and the year after you report that your health is worse. And then we have 2 categories which are a mix of unexpected shocks and expected changes. So these are the descriptive statistics for our sample. So for males and females separately. So first I show overall health expectations at t-1. And so what you can see is that more than 1/3 of individuals do not have any precise idea about the evolution of their health. So because they answer that they do not know whether their health will get worse or not. Okay. Then also, interestingly, you see that women seem to be more optimistic than men. For instance, you see that 21% of females expect worse health, but 29% of males expect worse health. Okay? And for expecting same or better health, this is the contrary. Women are more optimistic. For health transition now, we see that a large share of the sample, more than 2/3 of the sample, think that the health will remain the same. Sorry, not will remain the same, remained the same in the past year, remained the same. And then, regarding shocks, you see that 9% of males experience negative shocks and 24% positive shocks, and for females the number are 11% and 18%. So I just wanted to say in this first table that the share of males and females expecting having unexpected shocks is small, but it's not negligible. In the data, we are also going to create other variables capturing health shocks. So basically, using the SF36, we are going to compute the evolution of the score between 2 years and to compare the evolution with the expectation regarding the evolution of overall health. So this is not perfect because ideally, obviously, we would like to compare the evolution of the SF36 with the expectation regarding the evolution of the SF36, but we don't have this information. So basically, we are going to use this information just as a robustness check. And finally, we are going to use information on life satisfaction that captures how satisfied individuals are with their life, so from totally dissatisfied to totally satisfied. So for retirement, basically we have 2 questions. We have one question about labor market status that tells us whether the individual is employed, unemployed, and not in the labor force. And then for all individuals who are either unemployed or not in the labor force, we have an additional question about whether the individual is completely retired from the workforce or not. So basically, by combining these 2 variables, we are going to create our variable of interest, which take just 4 categories. Either the individual is employed, or is unemployed or not in the labor force but not completely retired, or is completely retired, that's what we're interested in, or he has never been in the workforce. So in our sample we have 39% of males and 50% of females who are completely retired. Okay, so this is labor market status, and we also use transition in the labor market status between 2 years, but basically these are going to give the exact same results, so I'm not going to present those results. So the empirical strategy first is just to regress having a shock between T-1 and T on labor market status, controls, and an individual fixed effect. We also have a dynamic version of the model that shows whether there is a change in unexpected shocks when we follow individuals before retirement and after retirement. So here are some results for regarding expectation and transition. So in the top panel we focus on males, and what you can see is that males, so when they are completely retired, they have worse expectations. Basically, they are more likely than males who are employed to expect worse health, and they are less likely to expect better health. But then, when you look at the actual transition, in fact, the health in general improves over time. So you see that they have worse expectation, but then the transition is better. For females, basically there is nothing related to expectation, and for transition there is some evidence that the transition is worse, meaning the health decrease over time. Obviously, when we combine information on expectation and transition, we get our results make sense. For instance, for males, we see that the likelihood of having an unexpected positive shock is larger than for employed males. Okay? When we use other specification, we will again find the same results. Basically, it looks like for males, being retired has a positive impact on these health shocks. And for females, we do not see anything, and in some other specifications, the results are very contradictory. Okay, so this is just the same using another specification. Then when we look at the dynamics for males, although our results are not always significant, because we have the sample size by definition is smaller, because we need to follow these males over many years, we see that there is some evidence that around the time of retirement, the likelihood of having a positive shock increases. You see that the green line that captures these positive shocks is above 0. Okay? And we did the same for unemployment for males to see whether there is something specific to retirement. And the truth is, for unemployment for males, we don't see anything. So it looks like the positive effect on health shocks for males is specific to retirement. We don't see it for other forms of changes in the labor market status, like becoming unemployed. Okay, so we had additional results that I do not have time to show. So we looked at the heterogeneity of the results for male by partner's occupation, for blue collars and white collars, but we didn't find anything. We found that this positive effect happened for all segments in the population for males. We also found the exact same results using physical and mental health rather than general health. And finally, we showed that negative unexpected shocks are obviously negatively correlated with well-being, and positive shocks are positively correlated with well-being. So this is an expected result. So as a conclusion, what we do in this paper is try to look at the impact of retirement on unexpected health changes using Australian data. So what we see is that around the time of complete retirement for males, there is a rise in positive shocks. And so there are more positive unexpected changes that come from the fact that males do not really well anticipate the impact of retirement on their health. They are too pessimistic, but in reality, retirement exerts a positive causal impact on the health. The results for females are mixed and they are pretty unclear. We also find that this is specific to retirement because unemployment is not associated with these positive health shocks for males. And so what we are trying to do now is to try to understand the asymmetry across genders, and our assumption to explain that probably females are better able to expect to form precise expectation about the evolution of their health is that probably they are more likely, let's say when they are in the labor market, to go out of the labor market, for instance, to take care of the children, etc. So this could explain why in the end they form more precise expectations. Okay. Very interesting paper. Then questions, comments?
Hello, my name is Sonja Spitzer. Thanks a lot for this talk. I was wondering if you somehow accounted for the time of retirement, whether there is some sort of self-selection into retirement, because as far as I know in Australia, the time when you actually retire is much more flexible than in Europe, and old age part-time is much more common. So is that something that could have an effect, or is it something that you can account for?
Let's say in our specification we use a number of control variables, and in particular age. So this should capture, I guess, no? That's not what you have in mind?
No, just that there are more incentives to stay in the labor force longer in Australia, up until the age of, let's say, 65 or 70.
Yeah.
So if those people already retired, are people that are more prone to to health shocks, for example.
So you mean they had health shocks in the past?
Yes.
And that's the reason why they retired?
Yes, or that, yeah, exactly.
We had other specifications. For instance, we had a specification where we control for lagged health status, and we still get the exact same result. You know, this positive correlation for males. So I think that's a way to address your comment.
Thank you.
Any more questions, comments?
Thank Thank you for your presentation. A similar question, and notably for the, I'm not sure that I understand the dynamic part of the problem.
Yes.
One might think that basically your optimism or your pessimism towards the future is linked to past health shock, So, so I don't, I have some issue about the relation, between your variables.
So in our
is it that you are simply pessimistic just because you previously had a bad shock,
Okay, in our specification we include individual fixed effect. So normally these fixed effects should capture at least one part of this pessimism or optimism, I guess. Then maybe what you have in mind is try to control for lagged health shocks. Yeah, so we didn't do it, we control for lagged health status, but not lagged health shocks, but we could also do it just to check whether our results are robust or not. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for your very nice work. If you have lots of data, large number of observations, you're always bound to have lots of heterogeneity, so you get low R-squared. But are you worried to some degree that the variance that you can explain is so low and there's lots of unexplained variance if you look at your R-squared? So this would be my first question. Second question. I'm not sure about the size of the variables, so I cannot understand how relevant your significant coefficients are. Because we always look for significance, this is a statistical measure, but we also look for relevance. To what degree does this really explain to what the size and magnitude of what you want to explain?
Yeah, so for the first comment, I agree that our R-square are really small, but the point is this is a linear probability model, so I think that we should have that in mind to also try to understand why these R-square are so small. So basically, normally we should use a logit or a probability model and see whether the goodness of fit is good or not, but the R-square is not really indicative, I guess. Then for your other comment, sorry.
Level of coefficients.
Yes, so this I completely agree with you. We did not do it, however there would be a very easy way of doing it, since in our regression we control for income, so we see the effect of income on this shock, so we should just try to make an equivalence between having such being retired, the change in let's say try to link retirement with the coefficient on income, like what is done in the well-being literature in general, and so we have a better idea. And then we can say, well, retirement is equivalent to such a change in income. Yes, and that would be a way to have an idea of the size of the effect.
The relevance of your coefficient.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for a nice paper and presentation. I probably missed it, but I'm wondering if you had a variable which was the employment status before you became retired. For example, I could have been on disability, I could have been unemployed, I could have also had a job, which we hope that most of them did, etc.
Yeah, so the results I presented here were just about labor market status. But in the paper, we have labor market status, but we also have another specification with labor market transitions. So basically, in that case, we see whether the individual were, for instance, not in the labor force and then retired, this type of transition, or a transition from being employed to being retired, and so we can see the differences between these different types of evolutions. So this, yes, we did it.
Okay, then, So I have another question which is trivial, but I thought I would never, I don't know whether you read the Swedish paper that you cited by Hallberg, etc.
Yeah?
Which of course is a good report of what it does say, but their study group was the group of persons who are employed by the military in Sweden who get early retirement at age 55 if they choose to do it. One of the only exceptional groups in Sweden, and they were all very happy to be retired at the age of 55. But I wonder whether it's a good paper to cite in this connection.
Yeah.
I'm asking the question. It's a very well done paper, I should say. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's absolutely true, I'm sure, of persons who are in the military in Sweden, which are almost no one, but at the end, and retiring at the age of 55. So.
Yeah, so yes, we agree with that, and this is not the only paper for which people just focus on one specific group because the identification strategy is looking at a shock, and the shock basically generally is not for the whole population. So we completely agree with that this is very specific, yeah.
Okay, and the last question.
Thank you for your talk. I wonder whether you have a highly selected sample because the most negative unexpected shock is death. Right?
Well, in our... no.
People who die are not in your sample, right?
Yes, so this is a question of attrition. So we can, in fact, first I want to say something. So first we focus on individuals aged 50 to 75. We do not, let's say the people over 75 who are probably more likely to die are not in our sample. And second, we also have a way of controlling for attrition using weights that are given in the HILDA dataset, just to try to address this issue. Yeah, that's the way we do it.
Okay, thank you very much. And